Let's introduce Sheryl right now. Again, doesn't need much introduction to many of you, but I think we should just restate now that she does use her art, emotion, history, and current events to convey messages and to inspire people through her quilted wall hangings. Sheryl is a descendant from notable plantation ancestors of the Mount Vernon and Woodlawn area, and last week she talked to us about those histories and her work in genealogy and connecting with other plantation descendants. And if you missed that, like I said, we'll be posting these recordings later next week. Although she's relatively new to quilting, Sheryl has always had an artist's eye, and she studied environmental design at the University of Houston. She has evolved a truly unique style, relying on a raw-edged applique technique to layer fabric rather than simply stitching it. Sheryl's work has been shown at several notable venues in the DC area, and she has been featured in several news and TV articles. And Sheryl, when you take over the floor here, you might also mention what just recently happened. There is so much more to Sheryl, and so she will present that. But Sheryl, I do want to ask if there's time, if you could reread your poem, so that in case anybody at the end of your presentation, so if anybody missed last week, they'll be able to enjoy that with you once again.
Thank you.
With that, Sheryl, please, we give the floor to you.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining me today. If this is your first time and for returning, if you saw the first presentation, I really appreciate that. Okay, so we can go to the next slide and I'll start filling you in on the second section, which deals with more of my faith quilts. Well, these particular two quilts were some of my earlier quilts, and they were more traditional style that I mentioned that I'm not real fond of doing, but I had just joined a guild, and the one on the right, I actually started doing in a block a month group where I was learning different types of blocks. And then it's special to me because it's fabric that was that I got from my mother, who's deceased, but I really love this. And a friend from the guild that I belong to, the Arlington Quilt Guild, did the quilting, long arm quilting for me on the top. The quilt to the left is a strip quilt that I made. I had a difficult time. So my friend Judy Balance helped me make this quilt in terms of squaring things up, because when I did it, my freestyle kind of got involved and some of my squares were wonky, and she had to scream my name out loud a couple times. And my friend and former coworker, Marilyn Owendorf, also belongs to Quilters Unlimited. She's in a different guild than I am, but she did the quilting, the long arm quilting for me on this quilt. So these are two larger quilts. As you'll see, most of mine are wall hanging size, but these two are more lap quilts, a little bit bigger than a lap quilt, not quite bed size, but they're two of my favorite quilts. Here are some more strip quilts. I made these from what people call jelly rolls, and they're just kind of 2.5-inch wide strips of fabric. And there's no right or wrong. You can lay the patterns out the way you want, lay the strips out, and put together a very quick quilt if you haven't tried it. And if you're new to quilting, this is a great one to do, because you just cut the strips in half, maybe sew them together, sew a binding on them and a backing, and you're done. Very easy to do. These two quilts were inspired by my faith, which is very important to me. And as I told you guys before, I'm not good with patterns, so I don't use them. I just will come up with an idea or an image, just start cutting it out, laying it out, and it just kind of comes together. That works for me. I'm not good with the tiny triangles and blocks and measuring every inch and centimeter. I just can't. But I like the free style of raw edge quilting, and just being able to express myself as I visualize it. So these are two. The one on the left I actually made for a friend of mine, and the one on the right I was kind of inspired by my daughter, although I told her it wasn't her. And it's here with me. Okay, here's some more. These two, the one on the left, prayer time, I did for my stepmother as a gift. She's a real big supporter of my quilting, and she was so patient as I would show her quilts, and they were going here and there, and I'm keeping them. And I finally was like, this one's for you. And she was so happy. And she and my father had a tradition of praying together every evening. And he's since passed. And this means a lot to her. And it really kind of captures their spirit. The one on the right, of course, is a quilt reflecting a biblical theme, and because my faith is important to me, I went through a period, especially when things were getting very dark in terms of the pandemic and politics, and I just would kind of, think in terms of the books of the Bible or topics of the Bible that were important to me. Some of my favorite stories, and again, because I really have in mind that the quilts that I do are going to tell a story when I'm not here anymore, and I'm hoping that through these quilts, my daughter and maybe her children at one point will be able to say, these are the things that were important to my mother. These were her favorite books of the Bible, or these are the things that were on her mind, and still have an essence of who I am, because I didn't have that in terms of my parents, and I really kind of wished I did. We didn't have quilters in the family, and I would have loved if I had found something like this and said, wow, these were so important. So in quilting and coming up with topics, that's what I focus on and think about. Hopefully in the future, it'll be as meaningful to my descendants as it is to me. Some of you have seen the one on the left. This is presiding Bishop Michael Curry, the head of the Episcopal Church. And he's just phenomenal to me, and somebody I greatly admire. And so one day, after hearing that he had spoken, during a tumultuous period, I said, I'm going to do a quilt of Bishop Curry. And I've met him a couple of times to my great honor and had some photographs with him. But I just knew that I needed this for myself, and really tried. I'm not good at portrait quilts, really. I don't have much experience doing that, but I tried to capture the essence. And when I do quilts that involve people that I know or that are important to me, I try to capture the essence of those people. And with him, it's surely his eyes and his smile. He's a very high official, the highest official in the Episcopal Church, but talk about a humble person. So I tried to capture that genuineness and humility in him. And, he's a very godly person. And then on the right, I captured women in the pulpit. I've attended churches with women in the pulpit. I've friends that are female priests and deacons and things like that. And that's another thing that's important to me. And also diversity. I always, I try to capture the diversity in things too. So this is not my exact church, but it does kind of, reflect what I've experienced, in the past in my church. Just a great place for peace, diversity, cultural inclusiveness, and spirituality. So that's what I tried to capture there. So another favorite biblical story of mine is Mary of Bethany. And some of you have heard of it, where she wipes the feet of Jesus with her tears and with her hair. And that's what I tried to capture there. And like I said before, sometimes my technique to me isn't the greatest because I'm still learning, but I try to at least convey emotion. What I'm feeling or what I want the viewer to kind of be able to relate to in my quilts. And then to the right, we have the Last Supper. And you can see who Lazarus is. Which of these things doesn't belong together? So this is him looking to the left with his hand on the pouch. For those who know the story, he was given 30 pieces of silver for betraying Jesus. So I just try to, again, include diversity in my interpretation of the Last Supper. And I kind of like the cosmic effect of the background material too. Yeah, I really like this quilt in terms of the message. And you can that's okay. I can take. I was just going to say, you can also see the quilting lines in this one I used coming from the Eucharist, or the host the bread that he's holding. Thank you. And this quilt represents Jesus talking to the multitudes, and the loaves and fishes. It's very hard to see, but right to the left, in this far left corner, is a basket with loaves of bread, and and the fishes, and the fish, and the figures and the stripe patterns are the 12 disciples, and then the plain fabric figures are the rest of the people. And there Jesus is out in the Sea of Galilee preaching. And again, I used the quilting lines emanating from him to add to the quilt. To the right is called Where Two or More Are Gathered. For those who are familiar with that verse, where two or more are gathered, so is God. So that depicts that. These two were the first of the biblical quilts that I did. So I just started at the beginning, and I did Genesis, and these figures, depict Adam and Eve. And if you look around the tree, you'll see a snake going up towards the apple. And I felt like the other figures just kind of depicted DNA and, maybe the beginning of people, the formation of people. So it's kind of to your interpretation, but that's what that's about. The middle one is Exodus, and there's Moses holding the tablets, the 10 Commandments standing out, in the desert, and looking off in the distance at the golden calf. And to the bottom right corner, you see some very bad people standing there with their heads kind of bowed because they know they've messed up. To the right, we have Book of Luke being depicted in this quilt, and the nativity scene, the manger scene, and far off, the town in the background, and the star, the big star overhead. And then maybe you can tell to the right are the 3 wise men, and then the Holy Family under the shelter there. This one is the empty tomb, and that's in the book of John. And to the front is Mary Magdalene kneeling and kind of weeping because she goes to the tomb and she doesn't know what happened, to Jesus. And she's trying to find him, and there he is in the corner. And the big chocolate donut in the back is the stone that, has been rolled away from the tomb. And then to the right is my idea of Jesus sending his disciples out into the world. They're just going in all different directions. This is one of my favorite ones too. So this quilt is about the wise and foolish virgins or bridesmaids. And the ones to the left are the foolish ones. They're just milling around, chatting, and they're totally unaware that their groomsmen are coming, behind them. So when they get there, they'll be unprepared. But to the right are the wise bridesmaids. They are there preparing. They have a fire to greet their groomsmen. They have the oils for their lamps, and they're just prepared. So and in the background, you can see them approaching. So I just like the colors, the intensity of that one. And again, this was used with the raw edge applique, and it's hard to see the quilting on top, but it's there. It's just pretty much horizontal quilting across the quilt. Okay, the quilt to the left is another Exodus scene. This one is when, Moses is parting the sea, and you get that idea with a big fish there that you can see. But I like this one, and it shows the people, crossing the sea, and the sea being, held in abeyance there. The one to the right represents Pentecost, and it shows the disciples being given the Holy Spirit, and that's depicted in the flames over their head. This one is called Walking on Water, and for those familiar with the story, it's when Peter gets out of the boat and walks towards Jesus that he sees on the water. And I really like this one too. I love the colors, the purples and blues, and as I mentioned before, people would say, "Oh, Sheryl, you paint with fabric," and this is a good example of that, because I find the fabric that really best depicts what I'm trying to demonstrate in my quilts, and that blue and green and white fabric at the bottom really looks like swirling water, and then the fabric in the background looks stormy with the deep dark colors. And then I actually used leaf fabric to construct the boat that Peter's walking out of. And I think Peter's robe was made out of a piece of a flowered fabric that I found. So a tip would be, I think, when you're doing these kind of art quilts, just when you're looking at fabric, try to look at it with different eyes. Don't just think a flower has to be a flower, or a stripe has to be a stripe. Think about how you can use it, because sometimes I might use stripes as the siding of a building or something like that. Just use your imagination and try to imagine, what else could this be? When I saw the leaves, I'm like, oh, I could turn this into the sail of the boat. It's just to give you the idea, and then your mind and imagination takes over. Of course, during the pandemic, I had to make Saint Corona. And Saint Corona was martyred for her faith, and she was torn apart on some trees. So this represents her. And to the right, of course, we have Saint Francis, and we all know he was well known for his love and relationship to animals of all types. Oh, I will say one thing. Can we go back to that? I'm sorry. You can see the quilting on the one on the right with St. Francis is in a circular pattern, and that was different. I just try different things. I never am 100% sure how they're going to come out, but I do like the way the quilting came out for this in terms of the composition. Thank you. And here's another St. Francis, different scene with different animals. and colors. I just tried to create a scene and put a little building in the background. And when I'm doing these quilts, what you want to do is really, think of the total composition. Have something in the foreground, have something in the middle, have something in the background that causes your eye to travel. And then remember the scale. Things closer to you are going to be bigger, further back are going to be smaller and maybe darker. So that allows the viewer's eye to travel through the composition, and that's important. And I think the use of that and the perspective adds to the reality of a scene. Okay, these are some of my favorite saints. Now, Josephine Vaquita was a Sudanese slave. She was captured by the Arabs when she was about 7 years old, lost her ability to speak, and was named Vaquita, which in Arabic means fortunate. And they did that to mock her because, of course, it's not fortunate to be enslaved. But she comes, she is owned and sold to several different slave owners and ends up with in Italy with with an ambassador type person and his family, and she ends up uh, seeing these Italian nuns and going in and realizing, that she's found a faith and has a belief in God, even though I guess maybe early on because of her life, she questioned these things, and she ends up converting. And because she's at this convent, she is not forced to leave because Italy did not endorse slavery. And the style that I made, well, let me back up. So she's important to me because my daughter is half Sudanese, and I was trying to do something to which she could relate as well in terms of a positive, so knowing something positive about an African saint. So the style that I made her in is a style that I took from Bisa Butler, who is an amazing artist and quilter. She went to art school at Howard University. She comes from a family of not just quilters, but seamstress and artists. And you can look her up on the internet. Mine is a poor example of what she does, but she just does beautiful work. So when I did Josephine Vaquita, I wanted her to be colorful, and I wanted to try to depict her using a bunch of different colors. And even though it kind of has loosely that Picasso look because nothing is balanced or whatever, I think you get the sense of it. And the crescent shape in the back kind of depicts the Arab influence, and of course the yellow circular halo effect in the back reflects her sainthood. To the right is Saint Faustina, another one of my favorite saints, who's well known for her visions from Mary, from Jesus, and she is another one of the saints that I admire because she's well known for having a painting done that depicts the Immaculate Heart of Jesus, for those who are familiar with that. But it's a picture of him with rays, red and white rays emanating from his heart. So I tried also to make a quilt of her in that same style, using different colors and fabrics. A few of my other favorite saints are Saint Teresa to the left, and Padre Pio in the right, in the center, and then Saint Hildegard to the right. And they're just, a couple of them were given to other people, but the center one I still have. And again, just a few of my favorite saints. More applique. You can't see the one on Saint Hildegard, but there's quilting all in the background and everything. but it's hard to see on this presentation because of the pattern. This too I really like, because as I was making these quilts, I was talking to my family and my friends, and especially my quilt guild members, and they're always encouraging me because I'm always feeling like I'm not doing a good enough job quilting. So when I did this one, it just came to my mind that I have the audacity to quilt. So that's what this quilt is called, the Audacity to Quilt, that I have such a passion for quilting, whether I feel like my techniques are that great or whatever, but it's got to come out. And I just envisioned, a quilt just depicting my hands, quilting. And if you notice, the thread makes a heart to show my love for quilting. And there are a few of the quilting tools. Now, notice you don't see a rotary cutter or a ruler because I'm not fond of using them. I just do freestyle. So there you have the scissors, and I just, go at it. And I really, I really enjoy this because I feel like if I can do it, anybody can do it. You just try it, because it's art. There's no right or wrong. You just do it. The quilt on the left is really an important quilt to me because I made this quilt after Justice Ginsburg died. And you all know what an effect that had on everyone. And a friend of mine and I went to the Supreme Court because people were leaving, mementos for her in her memory on the steps of the Supreme Court. And I was very touched by what I saw. All kinds of mood. People had their pearls on. People were crying. People were smiling. They were very reverent. Some were just laying flowers. But when I left, I just thought, what would Justice Ginsburg want from us? She would want us to be hopeful. She would not want us falling apart because she died. And she definitely would not want us losing hope because of the situation, because there's always hope. And she would want us to be united. So I created this quilt, and I wanted to have it show diversity of people and cultures. So nobody's, is specifically depicted here, but you get the idea that these are people from different cultures and worlds and races, and their hands are all up and, raised in hope. And the quiltings that I used around reminds me of a fingerprint, that we're all unique, we're all special. And I was really flattered because I showed this to some of the attorneys at my firm, and one in particular really thought it was wonderful, and the firm was nice enough to use it in their diversity distribution in terms of emails, and the masthead for one of their diversity website pages. And we're having a cookbook, a diversity cookbook, and this quilt the image will be used on the cover of that cookbook. And I think it says a lot about my firm, and it says a lot about us as a people, that, this is something we could all strive for. And it's a very special quilt to me. The one on the right similarly, depicts we're one. We're all people, no matter what color we are, no matter how our hair is, sexual orientation, whatever, we're one. And in the end, that's what's important. And these are just strong feelings I had during that time, because I was hearing a lot of things to the contrary. And every time I see them, it just reminds me that, yeah, we are one as a people. This one too. I created this quilt when I was really feeling down and I wanted something the opposite of what I was feeling. This was like during the protests, just a lot of negative things were going on. It just seemed like a dark time. So my answer to that was to do something very bright and jubilant and happy. And I think this quote pretty much covers it. They're dancing. That little girl to the left is like leaping for joy in the air. I love the movement of this quilt, and even the fabric that I use really shows movement in the sky, in the water, the colorful stones, the pattern on their clothing. Yeah, this is one of my favorite quilts for that reason. Again, this quilt to the left isn't really me, but I did kind of use myself as an example because when I um, was talking to many of my friends and just hearing people on TV, people were sick of being quarantined. They were tired of staying in the house and bored, all the days seemed alike. And I thought to myself, I'm not bored. I'm a quilter because I could just do whatever I wanted, use my imagination, take myself to a happy place when quilting and create my own, environment and mood. And that is what I see in this quilt. There's the quilter with all her tools. Notice no ruler. No rotary blade because I don't use those. And what I like about this quilt too was in the background is that little basket that actually has little pieces of fabric rolled up in it. So it's kind of 3D. But I try to use space to move your eye through the composition. And I use the quilting kind of as, lines in the floor to guide your eyes towards the perspective and the total composition. To the right is another one of my favorite quilts, and it's just like mermaids playing in the moonlight. And I love the way you don't see the front of the mermaid, but I just love how her hair kind of plays in the wind and the color of it against the blue and the typical Van Gogh sky that I talk about. I love that blue and yellow combination and just, a fantasy piece really. And if you look carefully in the back, you'll see another mermaid kind of in the water in the background. And this mermaid's just kind of blowing bubbles. This is total fantasy, but I like the composition of it. The colors, the way your eyes can travel through the quilt. And she's just kind of gazing at the moon. Yeah, takes you to a happy place. This one is very funny to me because a lot of my friends will say, especially if they don't quilt, quilters know we have a ton of fabric. We get it all kinds of ways. I'm really fortunate. A lot of my quilt friends give me things. They give me fabric. They've given me sewing machines. They've given me all kinds of things. Quilters are very generous people. But a lot of us, we can't help it. I don't care how much fabric we have. We need more. So somebody said, where do you get all your fabric from? And I thought, the Quilt Fairy. And so I did this quilt with to the right, you see a person sleeping in the bed and she's dreaming, eat, sleep, quilt. But to the left, you see this fairy coming through the window, dumping bunches of fabric on the floor. And that's every quilter's dream. Just wake up to more fabric. And again, to the left is just kind of a fantasy piece. I had a friend had given me this beautiful fabric in the background, the green with the different colored dots on the back. And I thought, what am I going to do with this? And then I thought, oh, it looks like, alternative worlds. You've seen the sci-fi movies with 2 or 3 moons or something like that. So I decided, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I had some fabric with that kind of impressionist looking style design on it. So I used it to create the mountains. Last week, somebody asked, how do you make the mountains? As you can see, I just cut them out. There's no real way. And I just used fabric that looked like, like it was grass on it with flowers or something. And I used part of it to create the trees, but they have that fantasy element. And then I made a 3D woman lying on her back with her books, just chilling, relaxing. And she's three-dimensional because when you actually see the quilt, her knees are bent. And then the what she's laying on that looks like brick, that's some African fabric that I had. So you can use all types and all styles, but the intensity of the colors remain the same. And I think that kind of ties it all in. And to the right is a compilation of some quilted postcards that I made. And I love these. And I had wanted some, my guild members all had them. And like, how do you do it? I just couldn't think. And so one of our members, I believe it was Tina, who's with us today, gave us a class on how to do it. And I thought, okay, let me try. Well, it was pretty easy. And I have all these beautiful quilted postcards now, and we send them to each other. I got one just yesterday, in fact, from Tina. And I've gotten some from other guild members, and we exchange them. And they're just so much fun. And again, you can do it with your scraps of fabric. There's no right or wrong way. Just, go for it. To the left, we have Bob and Gunner. And this quilt is really special. I have a friend that I've known since I was in high school here. And she's married, and her father-in-law is depicted in this quilt, and he passed. And then 2 days later, she and her husband's dog passed. And her younger sister reached out to me and she said, could you please, make a quilt of Bob and Gunner? So I snooped around on Facebook and I found this picture, and I changed it up. I gave it a different background and everything, and sent the quilt to her sister, and they just loved it. And again, I used different things. I used some kind of fabric in the front that had these purple flowers on it, and I just kind of cut weird shapes. And in the back, I made a better background because he was actually sitting looked like a parking lot or something. So I created a prettier background and some trees. So Bob and Gunner are together again. In the middle one, I have wonderful friends that are priests and live in Wales, and their sons are adorable. And I made this quilt of their sons for them. And they're in the woods with a dog. They have a dog, but it doesn't look like this, but it all represents the same thing. And mailed it to their in-laws so that when they meet up at some point, they'll have it. And the one to the right is of their sons too, which was made for the grandmother who lives in North Carolina. And I was really scared making this quilt because, I know the people well. And I knew I couldn't make them look exactly as they do, but I tried to capture the essence of them. And their mother, Laura, would do this thing on Facebook every day where she would ask her friends to help pick out shapes and colors for the boys to identify. And this quilt, I tried to incorporate that. And they have beautiful blonde hair and blue eyes, and they're very close, just sweet as they can be. And I tried to capture the essence of that. And it was very brave to send it to their grandmother, Rhonda, because she is in the art field and works with art galleries and stuff. So I knew she had an eye for color and design. So it was a little intimidating, but she was really happy with the quilt, which made me happy. To the left, a friend of mine gave me a ton of fabric, and it was all kinds of blues and some purples, but I was looking through them like, you know, like, ooh, it's like Christmas. You just have all this wonderful fabric. My friend Sue gave it to me, and I pulled out about 5 different types, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna I'm gonna do an all blue scene, and how am I gonna do that? So I came up with this scene, like a night scene. It's called My Blue Moon because I had a piece of fabric that had this circle in it. And I think it was a piece of African fabric that somebody had gifted me, and it had that hint of blue. So then if you look carefully, you'll see blue mountains, but that fabric is different than the blue sky. That is different than the little cliffs or trees that you see bordering the piece. And then on the ground, you see the woman sitting in even a different piece of, on a different shade of dark blue, and to depict the kind of shadows and ground and her dress. So I like this because the more you look at it, the more you see. But it's just a study in blue. And the centerpiece reminds me of growing up, and most of us know what kind of ordeal it was getting our hair done by our mothers, our grandmothers, and um, all you would hear is sit still. And so I had I had this piece of African fabric, and I personally find sometimes African fabric difficult to work with because the colors are a little bit different and the designs are big and bold, and it doesn't always come to mind easily as to what I can do with it. But in this scene, I said, okay, I'm just gonna kind of create this image of, you know, this mother fixing the child's hair, and um, still kind of a regal look, you know, because when you get your hair done, you're beautiful and all that. So that's kind of what I did with that. And then to the right, I have the chef, and the managing partner of the firm for which I work loves to cook. And um, I made this for him. And I was trying to think what I could do. I was thinking, oh, a landscape, but then I remembered, no, you know, he loves to cook. So I was going to create this quilt that depicted him creating his culinary masterpieces. So um, that's where I got that idea from. And like I said, I love doing landscapes. I paint. I haven't painted in a long time, but I have painted. And while I couldn't paint all subjects, my favorite things to paint were landscapes. So I did these. The one at the top left was just representing, don't let the sun go down on your anger. And I did this for um, a priest friend of mine, Meredith, who I wanted to, you know, to gift her with something. She's very supportive of my quilting. Um, and the one on the right, I did along with my faith-based quilts, which was called Still Waters. And it's just, you know, a quilt kind of depicting a peaceful place. And I used a lot of my scraps and different textures of fabric to create this. And that's the beauty of quilting, really. There's no right or wrong. You can use anything you want uh, to create your piece. You know, you just let your imagination go and, you know, audition things, try it out and see what you like. Use different colored fabrics, use the front and backs of fabrics which is what I did for the mountains. Parts of it are the front of the fabric, parts are the back. Um, so there's no right or wrong. The one at the bottom I made for one of my friends and coworkers, and it's called Rebecca and Richard. And she was another big supporter of my quilting. And like my stepmother, she would just, oh, Sheryl, that's so beautiful, blah, 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 blah. And I would never, you know, made one for her. So I finally did. And she was so happy. And it makes me happy that she has one of my quilts. But yeah, this is of Richard and Rebecca, two of my favorite people. I think we're getting towards the end. This I believe is one of my final ones. Here's another landscape that I did. And this one's funny because one of my quilt friends was going to teach me how to do uh, a landscape in a particular style. But I'm just not good with directions. So while she's explaining to me, how I can do it, I'm just cutting away and making my mountains and, oh, I think I'll put a tree here like Bob Ross. I put a happy little tree here and whatever. And I came up with this and she turned around, she's like, well, Sheryl, you've already created your landscape. Like I didn't do it in her style as usual. I did it my way. But I love this quilt and I love landscapes. And way back, as I mentioned in the beginning, I was telling a friend who had invited me to join the Arlington Guild, as a matter of fact, that I really wanted to do a quilt with minerals because I also belonged to a mineral club at the time and have a huge mineral collection. And I went to Artistic Artifacts, which is a local quilt shop that has amazing fabrics and things. And I told the owner, I said, what can I do? So she's like, oh yeah, you could do this. You could get these silk bags and attach it to your quilt. So that is exactly what I did. So on this quilt, just to show you that you could do anything with a quilt, I found pictures of actual pieces of minerals. And then I printed them out and I stitched around them and appliqued them to my fabric. And then I attached these silk bags that have actual mineral specimens in them that correspond to the pictures that you see. And at the bottom, so I entered this in my first quilt show, and you don't win anything, but you get these ribbons for participating. And I was thrilled because it's my first time. So that's what that's about. And I think that's the last quilt slide. Am I right? Yes. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you all have some.
Yes, we actually have a lot of questions, and I'm actually a little more moved even this time. I didn't think it was possible, but the color and the composition and the form and the movement, everything, and from the judgment, for the looks of how many questions we have and how many comments we have about, it seems like a lot of people were riveted, Sheryl. And so we only have about 7-8 minutes. Let's go through a lot of the questions. I do want to take one moment to say one of the comments that was just most recently stated that I think everyone feels: your connection to humankind is appreciated and so boldly captured in your works of art. So
thank you.
Just know there are a lot of positive comments, and let's jump right to a bunch of questions.
And I'll still read my poem at the end.
Yes. Yes. So Trinity, if you would do this, go to the Last Supper. We have a couple of questions. Several people were moved by it. I mean, I think this moved me as well. One question though, in the Last Supper quilt, why is Judas black? He seems darker to me, or is that my misinterpretation?
No, Judas isn't black. Actually, Judas was on the far other side. And he's in the white, and he had, I think the clothing might have been black. I don't remember the slide exactly, but just because, it was a contrast to the fabric it was a contrast to the fabric that I used to depict him. And he's holding the bag of coins and looking away, which was to show that he was not, a part of the group supporting him.
Loved the diversity there. Okay, let's go into a few more things. As you quilt more and more, do you find common symbolic elements in your quilts that convey meaning to you, and do you tend to repeat these elements? For example, colors, textures, shapes?
I mean, I think I must to some degree. There are certain fabrics that I really like you see a lot of the blue and yellow, that Van Gogh look. That's one of my favorite fabrics. But I think so. It's just what speaks to me at the time in terms of the subject that I'm trying to convey in a quilt that I'm making. But I like to explore. I mean, one good thing about being given fabric is a lot of times it's fabric I might not buy or colors I might not select because I'm prone to pick certain shades. So the challenge is to use what I'm given sometimes. And like the quilt to the left is a good example. One of my friends, Suzanne, gave me, I believe it was Suzanne, the fabrics to the left, and they're just very different, but they kind of have an exotic look. So it really just, it just depends.
True artist, Sheryl, a true artist. I don't think that the rest of us given a pile of odd fabric would come out with this. This is just,
a lot of
I'm
people
just saying. All right. Do you use long arm quilting on your rough edge applique? And if so, how do you decide what pattern?
I personally do not, because I don't have a long arm. They're very expensive. They're huge. But as I mentioned, I have friends that have them, and they have, you know, they've quilted the tops of some of my pieces. And because mine are smaller, I can do the quilting myself. But on some of those bigger lap size quilts you saw, my friends did it. But they have you know, they're computerized long arms. Quilting machines, and they have all kinds of patterns. You could do butterflies, which is, I think, that first quilt I showed you that I said had fabric that I got from my mother, and I did the block of the month. That had a butterfly quilting motif. You could do leaves, you could do circles, bubbles. The sky's the limit.
Okay, great. And then another twist on the same, are the fabrics themselves symbolic to your work? And let's stretch that out. Your work, your artwork, your thoughts and emotions, and the things that you represent, and even the work that you do with that you have done with your mother on preservation and ancestor and descendants.
Again, it's what I'm trying to depict. Like the Last Supper one you see there, I love that fabric in the background. It just looks like you're looking into the cosmic, you know, sky, like, you know, you're out in space, the eternity or something, you know. I just get that vibe from it. The one on the left, it looks exotic, you know. I think of, I don't know, the Middle East. It's just, so yeah, some of the fabric definitely is selected to capture a mood that I'm trying to portray in a particular quilt, or skin tones. I try to have a variety of fabric to do different skin tones and things like that. So yeah.
Okay, the circles around the head, such as the Michael Curry and the St. Francis quilts, are very reminiscent of the Orthodox iconography. Is that intentional?
You know, I love iconography. I've met an iconographer. There's a whole thing that goes to it, the prayer, the symbolism, the way they create the paints. So I mean, Michael Curry isn't a deity. He's not a saint, but he's like a saint to me. He's like a modern day saint. He's a very holy man. So when I did that outline, which is called echoing, really, what I did was I started at his shoulder and went around his head and ears and to the other shoulder, and I just repeated that. And that's just that echoing is a technique you can use just to do your quilting stage of it. But it's not really like I was trying to give him a halo. But if it comes across that way, that's fine.
Okay, so we're at time, but we do want to give a moment for you to do your poem, because I think that that's really important.
Thank you. And for those who weren't here before, it's about the Mount Vernon Slave Memorial, and my mom and I had done work on bringing recognition to the Slave Memorial back in 1990, and they had a special dedication with Governor Wilder and some other dignitaries. And I wrote this because we couldn't get Nikki Giovanni. So it's called Tribute to the Past, the Mount Vernon Slave Memorial. And so it is with love. We gaze upon the Mount Vernon Slave Memorial, erected in simple tribute and dedicated in collective memory of our strong African ancestors, stolen from their native land and scattered upon the shores of an unwelcoming world which offered them nothing but suffering and exploitation. Now lying in a peaceful, shady place beneath a calm they never knew. And so it is with faith. We believe in the dignity, the courage, and the strength embedded in the hearts and indeed the very souls of a people destined for greatness and undefeated by the times. Faith to see through the unending tears and the relentless years, a brighter day filled with the sun, which would warm the lands of a bitter world too cold to care for those that tried to strip of the very essence of their being. And so it is with hope. We look towards a future that will allow us to stand as mighty as those protective oaks that guard the tombs and stretch their limbs as if to embrace the tender spirits encased in each ring of the monument's base, stepping up as if into glory and reminding us with its circular form that we too, as a people, are to stand relentlessly united, unfettered through the winds of strife, and face forward in what seems like unchanging times, to meet life's challenges and come full circle to greet our destiny here at the roots of a people too strong in presence to ever be forgotten. And so it is with pride. We dedicate ourselves to serve, as did our great African ancestors, but not as victims of a troubled past, but as heroes of today, faced with the challenge of serving as living monuments and constant reminders that, yes, we are a people of strength, strong in faith, hope, and most of all, love. And indeed, that we shall never forget. Thank you all.